Yithu pak havai kya gach maran dal. You come with me, I will show you how vibrant is the lake. How can I show you from here? How can I tell you how vibrant is the lake? You come with me, I will show you. If you tell me what art is, then I tell you that you come with me, I will show you what art is. But the question is, if it is like a lake, then either you will see the lake with your own eyes, or the lake will show itself or reveal itself, its magnanimity or its depth, or I will show you the lake the way I look at it.
Art is confession. Art is secret. If there is a part of your mind which is going in a very logic-driven way, there is another part of which is observing the mind, and it's probably going in a space which is not to be condemned, and it does exist, and it moves on, and then comes a gap where there's a not in some sort of high brow sitting on the pedestal kind of purity and all of that, but probably this state cannot. It can only be produced in this state. I mean the art idea can only come to you because it cannot be sort of infected by anything else, maybe, But then of course, then comes the choice from the other part of the mind where you choose to produce this or not. Every time you put some standards, they need to be uprooted. You can never, it's an infinite. You can't end anything. There's always something which is going to upset it. So it's nice that it doesn't allow a large standard to be there. It's nice that it can constantly shift, and it's constantly no longer let a king be there. It keeps uprooting it and uprooting it and uprooting it.
In a sense, living life is like passing through a series of sudden revelations. You don't have to be a filmmaker or a painter to actually go through a series of revelations. You could be doing many things. Right. And experiencing very sublime, very beautiful, very transformative moments. I think it's essential to be able to be a part of a much larger whole, and to be able to integrate and lose yourself in a larger whole, and to relate and to get broken and to pick yourself up and to be inspired and so on from a larger whole. To be able to, even if it is for small moments, to be able to produce something that actually can move a larger number of people. So in that sense, I would say yes, I wouldn't in any way say that the power or the capability to transform lives, to understand life, to create a series of revelations towards truth, do not lie in a heightened or a exalted species. It is possible to find it all over the place. And you could be sitting in a boat in the middle of the night in a river without being able to see anything, and you could have a man there sitting with you in that boat who starts to sing. Right. And you can't see him and you can't see anything, and while he's singing you probably understand many things about life that night just listening to him. Right. So there are many revelations can take place. Right. And so I think it's very difficult. I don't think it would be right to fix in any sense the reception of an idea. For me, it's an illustration of a route of where you can find many beautiful moments which actually seem hidden, but actually they are there. So I'm actually in a sense taking this illustration because it's anonymous. For me, that's value.
For me, the creative moment I know is probably the moment when that transformation happens, when the alchemy happens, when the magic happens, when that intent that you sat down with has in some way been inflected just a little, transformed just a little. So you're a different person at the end of it. in some way, and of course those effects can't be measured or quantified, but it's all sorts of little shifts along internal fault lines that you know when you read it. I would like to write poetry that is about also the thinginess of spirit and the spiritiness of things, if you will. I'd like it all to just be as mixed up as possible without having to choose one or the other. So I'd like to be as carnal and material as possible, but I'd also like to write poetry that has lots of holes in it, that has lots of perforations in it. If I didn't have some notion of what it is to be, if I didn't have some idea of what feminism was about historically, I would be uncritically accepting notions of what it is to be a woman, uncritically very often, and in fact even aspiring to ideals that are being also planted in my head without even being aware of how insidious and how dangerous those can be. If I am to say today I'm feminist, I say it aware of the fact that being feminist is a process. It is not a state of having arrived for me. So when I say I'm a poet, I would say it in a similar fashion. It is a process, certainly for me. And yet in the process of conversation, I'm going to have to say craft, and I'm going to have to say poet, and I'm going to have to say feminist. But it's still a state of figuring out, it's a state of discovering, it's a state of making sense of it. It is not a state of having arrived.
I'm still searching for that. I don't think art is complete at one stage. When I finish a work, there are deadlines, I have to finish and I have to stop at one point, but mentally it is not finished, it still goes on. So but we have to stop at some point somewhere. That's it, stopped, but it can keep going, and I don't think at this point of time it is art, and at this point of time it is just material. It's how we present it and where we present it and what context we present it. When it can communicate at a right time and the right place, I think that's art.
I think as a belief system, I believe that art is like the research laboratory of our cultures. But personally, as an artist, I discovered art as I grew older. I realized that there was this extra language that nobody taught me that I have, in a way in which I could relate to the world and in which I could find others relating to me in terms of works of art or just a piece of building, or just the way somebody put 2-3 things together. It looked, oh wow, it's art. And it sounds good. It's a word which sounds nice to associate with yourself. But as an art, the way sometimes I find myself using art, and sometimes I find that art sort of comes out, it's not within my control, and it's not like a remote control that you try and that seems to govern every kind of consumption sort of pattern that has come to be today. I think it's art becomes a way in which I sometimes distance myself from what's happening, or sometimes I try and relate to what is happening, especially in terms of protests. Back in India, where I come from, there are a lot of things happening which I find I find myself a little weak as a person, just as a person. But I find myself strong as an artist because I have art, because I have a language which I can express myself in and express my belief systems in, and somehow it seems coherent. More coherent when I have art by my side. And but I also find art being sort of a veil that I use, and to distance myself from what's happening, because there's a lot of cruelty and a lot of injustice that I see happening, and which I'm a part of, which I'm inherently a part of, and a lot of it I'm not able to relate without something really going drastically wrong with me. And that's when art is useful, when it gives me a bit of distance and gives me it gives me craft, it gives me another sort of plane, it takes me on another sort of plane where I can express myself with sanity.
I grew up with very little knowledge of the world. I have been very comfortable in grey spaces in terms of meaning. So my work has been without any black and white clarity. So I like multiple stories. I liked the Gary Hume's work you were describing. Not stories which are singular stories, not linear stories, but almost as if from one point radially paths spread out and towards the single event or moment which I create. Multiple stories are possible. Working on trajectories of the eye, creating events through bodies. So that which is different from life around me. Yes, I'm experiencing it as an event which is extremely potent, and if it gives me one story, I don't paint it, and I don't use it in my video either. I try to arrive at a point where it has just it becomes an intense event, but that event has immense possibilities, but isn't anyone's story.
I somehow keep thinking whether this is not a process of making oneself as well as others alert. Something to do with being alert to one's circumstances, and equally to bear a sort of testimony to that circumstance. And maybe that's where it is. I mean, I think this is a kind of over-legislative position that I'm actually articulating at this moment. I'm not sure. And I'm, a kind of Shelley-like position. I'm not attached to that, but having said that, I believe that somewhere I think that if it's about alertness of different registers. I mean, it could be the sensorium on the one hand, but it could be through that the social circumstance, the bareness of life, the very aspect of being and communicating. And I think since theatre is so much to do with that terribly ephemeral moment of being able to be there in person, in flesh, and then talk of this peculiar thing called truth, in which directors sort of pompously declare to an actor that's not true to somebody's body, somebody's arm, somebody's eye. And somewhere, I mean, I think that we are about there. Perhaps we're talking about alertness to that moment, to that terribly ephemeral moment to which you have to be true. I think maybe that for me would be theatre. And I'm not sure that this adequately explains what I might think of art. But I think if one were to make one, I might make that connection that it is about some quality of awareness. And I'm not sure whether that's existential alertness or it's an alertness about engaged. I mean, just thinking that perhaps in all one's attempts to teach theatre, which has been a great part of my own life, I think it would be about engagement.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know whether it's just the excitement of playing. We call it a play, or is it just greed that we want to be so many things, or
as an actor, we want to be lawyers and cricketers and fathers and rapists, whatever. So I think it's one way of doing things that we would otherwise not do.
You just think about art in general. In a way, it's also the most personal kind of art, because you're only using your own body, because your body is your instrument. And your voice and your body, and it's very weird. It's a very strange relationship you have with your own body and with your own self, I think, because at the end of the day, the cameraman can leave the camera behind and go home, and I mean, not everyone can, but a cameraman can do that, an editor can leave the editing equipment, and people can, so much of it is just machinery and technology, and you can disassociate yourself from that in a way. My own acting thing is very confusing, because I really don't know when I'm just being myself or when I've just taken on a character, or if, like, there's times when I'll come home and I'm still kind of, a little bit like the character that I'm playing, in terms of just some characteristics, or the way my outlook, or the way I approach people, and I find it, I'm quite confused when we talk about it much. It's such an unconscious thing. I really don't always know what is happening. I'm not always completely in control, which is why the director tells me, do you want to do another take? Do you think you can do it better? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm happy to try another take, but just keep this one, because I don't know if I can do it better. It's totally, I don't know what's going to come in that moment. It's not something that I'm totally, it's not like I'm trying on different kinds of handwriting, that I really think it's very, very important to be neutral, to be completely neutral before going into a scene. And no, I just think that I don't like to force things, I don't like to force a situation in real life or in acting. I don't like to, I want to be as genuine as possible at all times.
The medium kind of took over for me, and I think more than anything. And then that led to other things. When you get into film, you realize, and you have a single narrow vision of, okay, it's only film, then you realize it's encompassing all these other art forms. And in a very idealistic way, one can think, okay, you can see art in it, you can see music in it, you see photography in it, you see writing a little bit in it, and in a very way it does it, you have to figure out where you can just shepherd all that in and make it work. And I feel that's what was very interesting, that it's over sensory stimulation of all these other mediums that kind of comes out. Not the best of it. I would say that film kind of bastardizes all of it. Still, in a kind of, it takes the music that it wants and art it wants, and the writing that it wants, and it just doesn't, of course it takes those mediums and just shreds them off whatever they had, and then just makes it into what it wants it to be. With film, it is my medium, so much so that I always question it, what it does, always. I always have this guilt of what it does to the culture, or whether to other art forms, or with the people involved in it. And I always feel, because I can say it because it's my kind of house. Right. I can, I don't like to comment on other people's houses. I don't know what's going on in there, but it's my house. I understand it, and I can say that it's doing this and that, and I feel, I've learned enough about it to say things on it, I guess, to say that it's mine, and I want to be able to. So I kind of very critical of the medium, because I am looking for answers. I really want it. I want to kind of understand it better. I think film can be a functional art, in a sense that like buildings can be lived in, and music can be utilized in your everyday activity. I think you can find art in it, or you can find commercialism in an art. I feel it goes both ways. What Warhol did, and what I would say John Ford did,
you know, which I'm a big fan of John Ford, and it's art, and then he never thought of it as art. You know, his westerns that he made, you know, and I feel they're gorgeous films. They're just amazing, and I think so. It kind of confuses one, not confuses in the sense that it should be that messy, because if there was such a delineation about what art is, then the mystery wouldn't be there. The exploration wouldn't be it. And for me, art is about exploration at this stage of my life. I think it is about more than me conjuring it up and say, okay, this is, you know, I'm the magician and this is what I think. It's for me. It's I think I wanted to discover for myself what it is. You know, I think if it is art, if it is at all art, you know, I feel I'm still trying to discover what I want from it. You know, and I feel this was a way I wanted to explore what it is about film that attracts me, and I keep doing it, you know, by making it. And that's the biggest danger, because then you see what's behind the curtain, and then you kind of, you know, that's what's the biggest thing for me is. So I whether it comes from art or commerce, I've kind of gotten lost in it.
Art is a way of looking at life. It doesn't have to be the act of painting for me. It's how you view things around you. So you could be a fantastic cook, and so you look at food the way you do, and that's art for you. So I think when you become sensitive enough to your inside and outside, you become an artist, I feel. And it only, once you start becoming aware of that special energy, that special discerning power, I won't use the word power, but once you become sensitive to that thought process, then you want to keep climbing levels to take it to the next step. It could be this lifetime, it could be another lifetime, if you believe in reincarnation, but it helps you, it pushes you to take it to the next step.
If you do not manage this peculiar tightrope walk, this tenuous and completely invisible line, which is that yes, you are the creator. So you, for a short period of time, you might think this is the one time you can play God. You're the creator of the characters, the work itself. At the same time, this is one time also when it's a disaster to have Hindu fatalism or a sense of fate itself come into the picture, because however much the Christian sense of free will might be a mirage or whatever, considering especially when you have the concept of grace, and grace is given regardless of your merits. But the concept of free will is very relevant here, is that because if your characters are to be living flesh and blood characters, then while you might think you're God, you have to give them enough room to make their own decisions. And you might have a grand design, but if you've got any sense, then very often you will leave that grand design alone, and you will really see where they are going. In that sense, your characters must be like kites. There's no point pulling them in the direction that you want to, because what you might do is that the kite might just decide to dive, and that's the end of the story. Whereas if you let it fly in where it wants to, then it might really take you someplace. You can't tell the difference between poison and ambrosia until you have tasted and savored both. And that is what an artist has to do, really. To assimilate and internalize the bad and the evil as much as the good. To understand Hitler as well as Gandhi, the non-violence of Gandhi or Buddha.
Starting from the fact of sitting on a toilet in Delhi and watching this little stain that appears on the wall, and every day when you sit there you see it growing bigger and bigger. It was hardly there to start with, and then it gets bigger and moldier, and little bits of paint start flaking off from the wall, and then you start thinking about what is to be done about this? What is to be done with this stain, with this mold, with this disfiguration that's happening? Should you get it painted over? Should you get the mason? How did the water get into the wall? Is it the monsoon rain that is clogged up? Is it the pipes? What is wrong? Should I break it down? Should I do it again? And this kind of seepage, the fact of a structure being put under stress because of a kind of invisible capillary movement of lots of things at work, which cause anxiety at some level for those who are invested in the structure, including me in my bathroom. But the fact is that if you stare at those stains long enough, you begin to see patterns. You begin to see faces in the mold. You can spend a long time staring and seeing people you recognize or landscapes you might wish to go to. And also you do realize that it is this stain, it is this ugliness, as it were, which is there, ugly if you look at it from one perspective, that is also going to cause change in the way the building is. And for me, both of these things are art, of staring, or what can be art, or what artistic practice can aspire to be. One is the ability to stare at the stain and to see patterns within that, to see the landscapes and the faces, and to sort of keep looking until you see something more. And on the other hand, it's also practice that causes anxiety, makes people forced to reimagine what structures can be and what encounters can be.
There is a creativity which is a creativity of the mind, because you're a scientist, because you're breaking barriers, you're breaking boundaries. You know, you're trying to look behind everything that you are told is true, and I think every artist does that. An artist is always searching for, some kind of truth which is behind something, and a scientist is doing exactly the same thing, but in a different medium. But they're of course there's very strong linkages. A scientist, I think, is decoding structures of the universe, and so is an artist. I think the exercise, which is a continual exercise, is to hone your both your intellect and your vision to recognize the significance of a moment or an image, where you can read a meaning into it which is beyond that specific moment. Every great work of art transcends its immediate moment and context. It's very related to it. But I think any really great work of art stands the test of time because it transcends. And I think that's an even more interesting challenge when you are constantly drowned by from your waking moment till your sleeping moment by you're invaded by visual and oral sensation right through your life. What is a visual image, or what is what can you make that has a power that can transcend that and can maybe last beyond that moment?
For me, more and more the sense of
of how it becomes part of yourself, and the kind of different facets of oneself. Somewhere art seems to, make you kind of be fixed in conventions, in form, in style, in a certain look, and those are very important, because that's the ground on which art is and is made from, and it becomes part of history. But as we were saying earlier on, that somewhere in your life there is a historical moment, there is a sense of liberation which you feel, and you feel so many others wish to feel. And that the famous, obvious thing, art and life kind of relationship. And can one still find oneself and be oneself, exploring difference and contradictions, and allowing always to be open and to put a question. Art also has that there's something that flows, which the viewer, because for me the viewer is very important, person who looks at, even if it's one person, that they kind of apply themselves, and they feel, well, okay, we can do the job also of connecting the various elements and fragments that seem to be there, which constitutes this artist. And for me, that is when actually art starts happening. I mean, art is a very precious thing, and it's valued, and it becomes a commodity, and people invest in it. But something of that 60s anarchism, that thing to break, to actually throw it away, and the long history of, you pick up garbage and you make art. I mean, I've done a whole, huge installation, a little city out of, trucks and trucks of garbage. And somewhere I have a desire to also just communicate that this is not all that precious, and mentally you should be able to throw it away, to start always, afresh with something. But that creates insecurity in most people, and people want to conserve, want to hold. But there is a part of me that also, wants to control, to conserve. I'm deeply interested in the archive. I mean, this whole project is about entering my grandfather's world, who took all these wonderful photographs. It was just a family album. He just took pictures of himself, extraordinary man, for 58 years, from 1890 to 1948, and you just find in a dusty cupboard, and it's your maternal, and then you start looking and holding it. So I find there's a part of me which is an archivist, which is the very opposite of what I just said, where I like things just to disappear. So the idea to tabulate, to bring it together, to transform, pictures from a family album and tell new stories. I mean, then the digital allows you to manipulate and represent and start a new kind of story. So I think that art, the great thing about it is it's constantly, giving you the possibilities that you can do all kinds of things. And yet when you start doing them, it's also hugely a kind of thing that conserves, that institutionalizes, that says, okay, now we know what it's all about. And I think artists are constantly living in these two sorts of things of making and then getting named. And you get your name, you get yourself named to the very thing you make, which you wanted to break. So, whether you're a Duchamp or a John Cage, I mean, then, there is a label, there's a Duchampian position, it's now a very important art historical position, which he would like to have discarded. So
it's meanings which are not too tightly framed, not too coded, which can open out, which can slip a bit, slide a bit around the edges. Also, the possibility of solitude. Well, maybe I'll just add that art is also about pleasure, and pleasure which is not commodified. I don't mean simply that you look at something beautiful and you get pleasure from that. You can look at something very painful, and there's an odd kind of pleasure in seeing and understanding that pain recognized and expressed. That is a kind of pleasure as well. But it's pleasure that's not about ownership. That's what's valuable.
It's trance in some senses. It's the act of doing it. It's meditative in some senses. It's healing in some senses. As much as any work or any labor that anyone does in totality. Not divorcing himself from the act. Not holding back anything.
When you begin to, when it doesn't take you to the momentary situation, it transcends to something which clicks, which does something, You are stopped, you're compelled to look at it again, and you get little, what is it? So for me that becomes art, when you questioning begins, questioning not as a question, not as a logic or a dialogue as such, but where you question yourself, what is it? For me, then it begins to become art.
It's quite clear that we can't sort of talk about this in any kind of universal way anymore, and that's part of the problem. It is a problem because I think other disciplines are able to define themselves in much more universal terms, and that they're able to therefore eat away at the territory of art and creativity. And I don't think that art can have recourse to any of these kind of languages, really, to describe itself. It cannot make reference to any sort of utilitarian or obviously real set of criteria in which to justify its existence or whatever. But I think that it's precisely that sort of, what can be called the standardization of life, the rationalization of life according to pragmatic principles, that means that the imagination is a more crucial part of life than ever before. Because those things, I think, are naturalized to a very great degree. They are internalized such that we do live in a world, I think, where even our interior space seems to be organized according to the same principles of, managerial energy. And I think that really opens up the space, or makes it imperative for people to sort of exercise their imaginations more. And I think that things that astonish me, things that open up the gap between the real and the impossible, or the now and the eternal, these in some way open up to the possibilities of myself, different kinds of being and different kinds of political organization or whatever it might be. And that's where I think I'm fascinated by art. That's what I think I'm striving for in what I do, and that's where I get excited by what other people do.
I don't want to invalidate anybody. I just want to make everybody aware this exists, and whether we could have the possibly, can we shift this? Or why don't we shift this? What is it for us that we don't want to shift or want to shift? So these are queries. I would like to be a partner with the other person, rather than I'm an outsider and you're my subject or an object. I'd like to be a partner in a query. So I know now that that's how my work is about. So it's not about perfection. I've certainly given up being perfect. There are stains and all, but then once I retain them, they are my work. and I quite enjoy them. I become terribly. I have this habit of being perfect. That's my character. Everything has to be perfect. But then what is perfection? Like for you, what is perfection is not what is perfection for me. But at that moment, whatever I'm doing, I am agreeing that's perfect for me. Now I know that.
You have a what you can say, a body which can make these geometries. You are the way you move, the way you walk, all these are related with your body, and so this is the language. It is your language of your body, which you can reach up to this, you can reach up to this, or like that, and so that is your sign, the language. So through this, when you put a line like what do you say, horizontal or diagonal or vertical, these are all it's related with your body. You can't. It doesn't come from anywhere else. Right. So that's you are stating through this language. You are stating where you are, what you are. Whatever we do as artists, why we do it? Why? Mainly because this is what expresses your being. You do it, so you are. And whatever comes or whatever intentions can behind, it is all your being. It's related with your being. So you do it. For me, the real subject of my painting is searching, trying to understand the unknown by confirming by my being. So the more I kind of make sure of my being, I try to reach towards the unknown. Indian thoughts, they say that once you are an artist, you have no more reincarnation.
Well,
because you would have lived all that incarnation.
Yeah. From a memory of a visual image, in the crucible of mind, he is changing it into a perfect visual code, which is capable of communication. If I go and see a Van Gogh, I don't feel he's unknown to me. So that is where, because they kept the integrity in their own terms and tried to reach the point, the point of this, the what you call it, a kind of an identification with that great principles of nature. Then it reaches a spiritual level and its communication is very different than the sensational words of, say, a Francis Bacon or Andrew or something like that. They are theoretically very sensational. Or historically you can say they have changed the language and things like that. But these are quite immaterial. These are only the making of a way, but not arriving somewhere. It doesn't matter much what is the political situation in this country today, or what is happening, or what is the latest and what is the trend. These things becomes material in this search. It's a complex search and it's difficult to achieve. I agree. I don't know whether I can achieve it, but still I don't think I should because I don't know this unknown destination, that doesn't mean I should stop my searching. So that makes me active, that makes me conscious. The kind of work I have to do and the kind of things I have to think about as a painter. The kind of realism practiced in European art, we never practiced. Our language, visual language, never tried to do something what you saw. But beyond seeing, that means how to change the nature into simplified visual codes. That communicates more than what you see and communicate. So that difference is very essential for me to understand my culture. And so it is in a process that I go back to Rajasthan, because that is the only place there is a living tradition of miniature artists, and also see how great miniature painters painted in a situation. The landscape is familiar, people are familiar, so I can connect with a period which is lost to us. So that I have been specializing in this very small area and give a very personal expression to the whole thing. So I don't know whether I am relevant in the modern times, but this is what I am doing.
Two-way traffic it has been for me. One is to find out what painting is all about, what art is all about, and secondly, what an image is all about. What it is, if I name it, if I define it, then I would lose it.
You lose it, right?
It's better not to keep it as it is within yourself, so that even I don't want to define it for myself, because that would be again doing things that I know. For me, every painting is a beginning. That's important. And if I define it, and if I tell you what it is all about, then I've lost it. And I depend more on intuition than on logic. I think intuition, for me, makes a major part in my work than anything else. So I have to reject, or rather not involve in anything which then deeply touched me. And I painted from what was within me, not which was being done. It's a very small journey. It's a small journey, but it still continues.